Hey there. Welcome to the Flute 360 podcast. I'm Dr. Heidi Kay Begay, and I'm a flutist, educator, coach, and podcaster. My God-given mission is to serve you. I am passionate about guiding you, the modern-day flutist, to discover your unique voice on and off the stage. The goal of this podcast is to help you thrive, both as an artist and as a musicpreneur. Go ahead and grab your espresso, your favorite notepad, and let's get to it. Today's episode is episode 329, and it's titled, Your Studio is a Lab, Teaching with Curiosity and Care with Alexandra Petropoulos. Hey 360er, before we dive in, have you registered for our next Flute 360 Accelerator session happening Saturday, May 31st? This month, we're joined by the incredible Alexandra Petropoulos, who's helping us tackle a big one, perfectionism. If you've ever felt frozen by the pressure to get it right, this session is your breakthrough moment. Alex will guide you through tools to shift from pressure to play and show you how curiosity and experimentation can unlock your best artistry yet. Grab your seat now. The link is in the show notes below. Welcome back, Flute 360er, to a very special podcast episode with my new flute friend, Alexandra, who you may know as AKA the Flute Nerd. So thank you so much, Alexandra, for being here. We have a lot to talk about. Really, truly, we should have like a 5-part series with Flute Nerd and 360, because I could pick your brain about your flutepreneur journey, how you build your studio, mindset, the amazing offerings you have. So be ready, because you may be in it for the long haul with me.
Oh, brilliant. That sounds great.
Great. Shoot, I love that. So before we get into the topic for today's episode, today we're going to specifically talk about you, the flute instructor, and the health and the well-being of your students and your studio, so you can really thrive in the upcoming summer months for lessons and the school year 2025 through 2026. But before we get into that specific topic, I want you to introduce yourself, Alexandra, to those who may not know you.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. But yeah, I'm Alex, the Flute Nerd is what I like to call myself, because I just love the flute and thought that was an appropriate brand for me, just because I am a total nerd. I've always been a nerd. But yeah, to tell you a bit about myself, like what? I don't even know where to begin. Where do you even begin?
Right.
Yeah. So I've been, I'm originally from the US, but I moved out to do a master's here in the UK. So now I'm based out in London in the UK. So I'm kind of straddling these two worlds between the US and the UK, which is quite fun. And yeah, trying to think what else one of the interesting things I think is, we were going to talk about kind of like music education and how to be kind to yourself and have like that really nice counterbalance to the traditional music education. And one of the reasons I've become kind of this character that I am online is because I had my soul destroyed by music school. I went through some really tough times, really having what I thought was just this amazing joy in flute when I first started, kind of squashed by teachers and, kind of classical music education, so much so that I had to take several years away. So then after moving out here, I managed to come back and then have filled my life with all this joy and tried to do lots of teaching around finding creativity in your playing and finding a sense of joy and playfulness. And that's led me to do things like teaching as the Flute Nerd or doing some educational stuff online with my social media posts and all that kind of stuff. And then also the Flute Nerd Lab, which I've recently created as a way to try to connect other people who kind of feel like they want this community of joyful flute players, because sometimes it can be really competitive out there. So trying to find those communities.
That is fantastic. Oh my goodness. Yes, yes, yes. I could talk about just one point of your journey of that 7 to 8 year break away from the flute, like what you were doing, what you were, rediscovering about yourself and coming back to find the passion and the love again to reignite your inspiration for flute playing. Because when you've been squandered and when you've been diminished and put down for so many years, especially in that competitive flute world, in terms of actual competitions, festivals, and degrees, you can maybe find yourself at some point within that career journey of obtaining that degree and going, why did I start music in the first place? Like, why am I here? What am I doing? Like, what is it all about? And you lose that vision and you can lose that mission so easily if you unfortunately, like, I don't want to be the Debbie Downer, but if you have unfortunately been around maybe toxic teachers a little too long, then they can squander that love and passion that you originally had for music making.
Yeah. And I think it's not even necessarily just the teachers. Like, I was quite lucky. I really loved my teacher in music school. I thought she was, hard. She really forced me to kind of do some really good work. But, she was also very encouraging. It's just the general environment, though.
Okay.
So it wasn't necessarily, an individual teacher, although my very first teacher was, I'd say, toxic. I came to her saying, I want to do music. And she went, no, you're not good enough. And so I had to go prove her wrong because that's just the kind of person I am. But yeah, I think it's just in general, you get these environments and, it doesn't help. Obviously, we talk about it as flute players all the time. The competitiveness of jobs out there is so hard just because of the nature of our instrument. So it's not necessarily, individuals. It's just this kind of environment that we've created in some ways, I think. But
100%. I think it looks like I have kind of told on myself in my own journey. There are individual teachers who have literally completely empowered me and lifted me up and said, Heidi, you can be whatever you want to be and whoever you want to be in the flute world. And then on the opposite side of the coin, there are those teachers who say, and then that's why I think I said specific individual teachers, but you're definitely right. Like environments or yourself, you could be completely burnt out. Maybe you're not taking a healthy approach to your music making and you are actually, I'm saying this in a very loving way, your biggest culprit of putting yourself down. And then, that individual self-negative talk over time can lead to burnout. Where's the love, etc.
Yeah. And I think that was mainly what my issue was when I took that break. I mean, part of it was I had actually pushed myself so hard because I spent so much time doubting myself and really trying, because I am a competitive person. I mean, if I'm playing games, I'm there to win it. So I just have that. We say it's a Petropoulos thing. It's something in my genes. I have to compete. Yeah. But so I was really, holding myself to those competitive standards when I was in school. So I really pushed myself so much so that I did actually injure myself. My left wrist ended up quite so painful. I couldn't play for a while, which is one of the main reasons I took a break. But it was also just that whole mindset of just well, I'm never going to be good enough. What's the point? So it wasn't even necessarily anyone, telling me that other than myself, which was just really sad, and it makes me really sad just thinking about the same sort of thing doing either to myself or just anybody else out there who's about to go through that same thing of being you just can't do that to yourself. You can't speak to yourself like that because it's just not going to get you anywhere. And we're always our own worst critics. So there's always that. Yeah. So I took that break mainly just because of all the, the negative thinking, because the wrist heals after a while, right? You do take some break from practicing and that, that as long as you come back to it in a healthy way, you can probably get over that in maybe a couple months. I don't know how long it took me, but it was just the mood. So what I actually ended up doing is, because I'm obsessed with music, I couldn't just take a step away from music. So I ended up coming out here doing a master's in ethnomusicology. So I decided to do more of the anthropological studies of it so that I could still do it. And the beautiful thing about the flute is that there is flute in every culture. So it was I was still trying to hold on to the flute nerdiness of myself by just diving into all of that. So I did take that, I think it was, about 8-year break. And I say a break, I did still keep a hand in like some teaching just because I didn't want to completely lose it, but I wasn't playing for myself anymore. I couldn't bring myself to enjoy it, and I kind of just focused on all of the fun cultural music that I was listening to. And I ended up going down a very different path where I was an editor for a music magazine that was all about world music. So I kind of went down that side of things while trying to keep the flute up. But yeah, towards the end of that journey, I realized I just wasn't as happy because I wasn't being the performer. It killed me to go listen to all this amazing music and just always be the observer. Like I wanted to be in it, which is maybe just really selfish. I don't know. Maybe it's a bit self-centered. I just had to be the performer. So I decided it was about time, about after those 8 years, that I had to come back to it and I had to kind of find a way to make it work. So yes, that's how I came back to it. But I really changed how I did approach it anyway, like it was much more about, I'm just doing this because I love this instrument and I just want to play music. And it was amazing what a difference it makes.
Amazing. I love all of that. Yes. So it sounds like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like that 8-year break was a healthy break in order to, for when you did come back, you had more intention, a healthy intention of saying, if I'm going to return and I want to return, how will I approach this? What will my career look like? And you it sounds like you took the reins in your own hands to say, yes, it didn't really work out or pan out this way or that way, but if I'm returning to this, what's going to bring me that joy and how can I serve my community in a very unique way? And you're talking about ethnomusicology and your other interests in research and writing and editing. That's amazing. And I think we need to talk about that in platforms like Flute Nerd and Flute 360, because I'm trying to, one of my soapboxes through Flute 360, as you know, is to say, yes, you're a flutist, and what are your other interests? Because when you pair that with marketing or art or sports or rehab or exercises, what can you build for your community in your own unique way? And full circle back to your story, it sounds like you're doing just that. You're finding, and it's not like you have completely found because we're always pivoting, but you have found your corner of the world to say, this is me, this is how I can help my flute nerders and, and bring life and joy to that specific community. So that's why I'm saying I could literally do a 5-part episode series with you, because that in of itself could be its own episode. But it sounded like it was a healthy break. And a lot of times I think we kind of push away like, oh, if I don't take that break, I'm going to air quote fall behind, or I'm going to forget. Like I had recently, and I'm coming out of a break, a 2-3 year break from a car accident. And it's scary. And so I want to full circle back to you, like encourage you or just praise you to say congratulations for you to have that courage to come back after an 8-9 year break, because it can be scary at first. And I think a lot of flutists, because we tend to be type A perfectionists, we think what's going to happen? I've lost my chops. It's not going to come back. It's not going to be the same. No, it may not be the same, but maybe for the better. As I'm coming back to my instrument, I'm noticing more self-compassion. I'm meeting myself where I am. And that dives into and segues into this topic of a healthy studio. I think you as the instructor, and you can pivot off of this, Alex, but I think you as the instructor, you need to be in a healthy space as you're creating that healthy environment, as you are creating that healthy support system for your students to be healthy and to thrive. We need that ripple effect. And it starts with you, the source, and not that you're the only factor in this, but you are the one creating that environment. And so if you need a break, take it. If you need to go to therapy, take it. If you need to whatever, take it. So that way your studio can thrive.
Yeah, no, I think that was a huge thing. I think realizing that when I kind of came back to it, because like I said, I had been doing a tiny bit of teaching just so that I wasn't like never touching the flute. But having come back to it and going, okay, right, I need to just do this again for myself, really changed how I taught. Because I mean, part of it is you end up learning so much, about yourself when you do it that way, but also about like all the different ways to learn, I think, because obviously, and I don't know, maybe this is just my kind of blinkered view of it, but like when you're in classical music education, there seems to be a very kind of like set, like you must learn this, you must learn this, you must learn this. And you kind of get like set into that. So when I was still doing the teaching as kind of like just a way of staying in it, I was still very much that kind of a teacher of like, if you didn't learn it this way, I don't know how to help you because this is what I was taught and this is how I, did it. But coming back to everything, it was it was not only coming back in a compassionate way, but also in an experimental way, which is again part of the reason I go for the Flute Nerd, because I love science and I like being like an experimenting mood. And that's what it's it. You go, well, what happens if I do it this way? And because you start experimenting with that in your own playing, then you realize that when you have a student who isn't vibing with your original method of teaching, you can actually start to go, okay, well, what if I explain it this way? Or what if we try it this way? And you start experimenting within your lessons as well. And I have found that to be the most valuable thing as far as my teaching goes, because it teaches them that it's okay to not have the answer as a teacher, because sometimes we get that view, especially like younger kids get that view that like, oh, the teachers, they're the boss, like they know everything. Mm-hmm. And it's like, we don't know everything. Nobody knows everything. We're all figuring it out as we go, So I think that that's quite a valuable thing for them to see. But also like the act of experimentation means we're going to come up against roadblocks. Like that's the point of it. Like you don't have an experiment that always goes right, or else it's not really an experiment, because then you're not testing those boundaries. You're not really figuring out where they are. So by doing that, I think has been super valuable. But also just in general, like if you're not enjoying what you're doing, that comes through in your teaching. And I think, obviously I like to think that I'm a good teacher, but I surely couldn't have been that good of a teacher during that break when I was still in that place where it's like I just hadn't reconnected with it. I mean, I still had students do okay, so I must have been doing relatively all right. But, it's like I know my students now are getting such better education because, I love this. I love what I'm doing. And I love, finding ways of making these people love it as well, because that's what's so rewarding about teaching. So
I love all of that. Yes, you could not have said that any better. We're always exploring. And I think the finest teachers out there are willing, like you just said, they're willing to admit, I don't know everything, but I am willing to be curious. I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to be flexible and know and take what I know as a foundation, but then go off from that like a trampoline and bounce into the unknown with you so we can explore how you're going to comprehend and digest this challenging concept, whether it's double tonguing or triple tonguing or tone colors or whatever have you. Yeah. Yes, this is a complex concept. This is how I've taught it in the past. But if you are more of a visual learner or kinesthetic learner, let's find ways and analogies and examples where you're going to go, oh, and have that aha light bulb moment. And then it's fulfilling for both teacher and pupil.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting too, because I know, sometimes, and again, just going into like the whole nerd thing, I love learning. Like I love listening to other people talk about the flute. I love going to other master classes and I just eat that stuff up. Like I love listening to other people talk. And I've always been so fascinated. There is like a real divide in some of those teachers, like talking about that, like or saying I don't know everything versus, oh yeah, this is the gospel or whatever. But like you do see that in some players, and obviously some players, they're amazing players. So if they say that that's how they perceive things and this is what it is, then you kind of have to think, yeah, okay, that's interesting. But then there are some like really, I don't know. So I just find that there are a few people I've noticed in the community where they talk about things in such an interesting way that nobody else has ever talked about. And then it kind of just makes you go, oh, well, that's really interesting that you would say this, but nobody else has mentioned this. And we're not talking about that, which I think is really interesting. Like everybody is so kind of set in their ways that this is how it is, that we don't seem to be going, maybe there are other ways to think about this. And I just find there are fewer people who are willing to do that than the ones who seem to be going, oh, yeah, let's talk about this in a completely different way, if that makes sense.
Oh, completely. What I'm hearing is those people who are saying things a little differently than what the norm is. I hear that person really tapping into and owning their unique perspective through trial and error, through taking like teacher A, B, C's ideas about tone and saying, okay, I'm going to take all of that, digest it, put it into a pot, stir it around, practice it, see what comes up, like you said, in the laboratory. What are the results from this experiment? And then having their own epiphanies through the process and saying, oh, for me, it means, and they were able to digest and spit it out in their own unique voice and say, this is how I'm perceiving it. And they're getting off the page and saying, instead of, I'm saying this in a very loving way, instead of being a parrot, right? Yeah. Instead of just kind of, probably want a cracker, instead of just parroting what their teachers have always said, they're actually, what's the word I'm looking for? They're being courageous with their own voice, and they're willing to say, well, let me figure out how I'm going to actually articulate this. Because it takes time to practice like that one-liner. Do you know what I mean? Like technique, one of my pillars in my teaching, and the one sentence I kind of always go to if my students having a hard time with technique, that's like my foundation. And from there we can explore. But one of my technique staples is, if you have a technical problem or issue, find the melodic solution. Yeah. But you don't come up with that one nugget, like bam, targeted sentence right off the bat. It takes time to like evolve and tweak it and find that punchline. So that way you can be more succinct. So all that's to say is, I think what Alex and I are saying is, be comfortable with like the messiness of articulating how you perceive tone or breathing or whatever concept you're trying to explain to your students.
Yeah, well, and I think it's kind of interesting because just going off that, the idea of like, you have to kind of have that courage. I think that you said courage to kind of say, wait a minute, what if I do something different? Or what if I think about this differently? And I think that's a huge part of it, because that kind of comes into that whole level of self-confidence. Like if you don't trust yourself and you're constantly doubting yourself, then if you hear like this really well-known or very top of the line players say things are this way, technique, you must think about in this way. And then you go, oh, I can't possibly, like, why would I know any better than them? But of course, everybody's experience is different. And everybody's like, when, just thinking about technique stuff, like I remember one of the things that it has always stuck with me, it's a really random one, but like, the Gilbert Legacy, the classic book, Gilbert talks about having his thumb pointing up the flute. And it's just like, no, that's awful. Like, I would never do that. But then I was like, well, maybe I must be silly because, it's Gilbert. Like, how could I be doing? But then it's like everybody's body is shaped differently. And like, perfect example of that is I have a double jointed thumb. So even when I'm not like pushing anything, my little joint sticks out, So it's just like my body's going to have to be different. And that's okay. And finding that and telling yourself, I know myself better than Jeffrey Gilbert does, So I'll be able to, so I think that is an interesting one, that you have to have a level of like confidence in yourself to say that I know not necessarily I know what's best for me, but as in I know that I will find a solution that works for me, and always kind of testing it. Because obviously if I tried to, like sticking with that thumb example, if I tried not using that because I was like, oh, that's not going to work for me, but I was getting a lot of hand problems, then it's, I'd need to reassess that. But, if you find something that lets you play really healthily and relaxed and you kind of hitting all of those markers, then who cares what it looks like? It's very similar with embouchure. I'm sure like everybody has such like set things of what an embouchure should look like. And it's like everybody's mouth is different. As long as you can do all your things, your high notes, your dynamics and all that kind of stuff, you have to find what works for you. So, yeah.
Oh, 1,000%. It's funny that you talked about the thumb, because I play rockstro style. I play with my thumb horizontal on the barrel.
Do you?
Yeah. I don't understand putting your thumb directly under the F key, because for me, it's like, I can't find that balance. But my thumb, if you look at my thumb, like it's hitchhiker. So going behind the barrel is more comfortable for me, because then when I kind of have that slight, I'm saying this with knowing that it's not with tension, when I had that slight push of using the thumb into my chin, that fulcrum, that left index finger, kind of right there's that balance point. But then I can have more of that push of the thumb behind the barrel to go into my chin to have that stability. So see, there you go. I mean, you have literally different views on that. And again, what works, and listen and being curious. But, if you are, I will say as a disclaimer, and Alex said this so beautifully, if you are a younger student listening to this and you're thinking like, well, how do I find that courage? Listen to your teachers who have the experience, read books like what Alex just said about the Gilbert legacy, things like that. And you have to you will start having that confidence and forming your own opinion based on like the expertise, the people you trust. And then as you go from there, your own voice and your own knowledge of body awareness will grow, because then you have accumulated what everybody has said. You've done the research, you've listened to your body, you've had the experience. And then from there, you can actually start forming your own voice.
Yeah, I think that's like the huge thing. You have to like, and again, because I love learning, I love like grabbing all those bits of information, but then you start to see, oh yeah, that's really interesting. Or you start to see like the through thread of like, or the through line of what, like, oh, they say it this way. That's kind of the same idea as what this person said. They just said it in a different way. So even though they sound like they're saying different things, it's all kind of the same. But I think for me, and maybe, and again, because I was so hard on myself, and I still, and like, I'd love to say that I'm in a better place than I used to be, but it is still a constant battle, like it's not, I constantly tell myself like, oh gosh, what am I doing? What am I talking about? But like, you have to just remind yourself, yes, the thing for me that kind of helped me go, maybe I do know more than I think is that like when you started hearing certain people, and this is, I feel quite more prevalent these days because of social media, because it's very easy to have a platform now to say anything. When you started to hear people say things and that you're like, oh no, that's not good advice. Please don't say that. Because you start to, all of those things that you've accumulated over those years, and like, oh no, that's gonna be disaster. Like whenever. So it was like that kind of a moment when I felt like I could say, oh yeah, no, that is not advice I'm going to take at all. Yeah. That was like, oh, okay, maybe I do have enough knowledge to kind of say, okay, I feel comfortable in that decision as well.
I see.
Yeah. It's so easy to say anything online these days though. So
yeah. So check those resources and I love your branding, going back to like you saying, like knowing yourself as this, air quote nerd, and you love to read and be a sponge in education and this continuous learning. I love that. And I could talk about branding all day long with you too. And maybe part two. But, so the reason I bring that up is because of this idea of the laboratory. I love that idea of experimentation and laboratory. And I think like going back to our main topic today about, healthy studios, if you can see perhaps like your studio, like what Alex is saying, if you can see your studio as that laboratory, and be curious and listen and open up to what that individual student needs, then the sky's the limit without sounding cheesy.
Yeah. And I think that's been like, it's been such a big thing, is just feeling like you have that safe space, because I don't feel like we're often presented as students. And again, I think there is a movement, it seems, or maybe I'm just surrounding myself by people who seem to agree with me, but there does seem to be a movement of like educators out there who are like challenging this whole like traditional classical way of like, you must do things in this way. So hopefully this does mean things are changing in general. But I just feel like when I was going through school, there was just not that kind of safe space of like, what if I tried it this way? Or what if I did this? So I think having that space as a student has been, or at least giving my students that space, has been one of the most important things to me. So.
Oh, completely. Maybe it's because us millennials are now the teacher age and we're taking over.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's probably something to that. Every generation is going to probably bring their own thing.
Yeah.
But and it's also funny because I was just thinking like, I like, that, things like extended techniques and beatboxing, those are becoming like more and more things of like just general ways of teaching them concepts. So, singing and playing is now like, we can use this for your tone. It's not just, ooh, look at this cool thing you can do. Because that's what it was. It was like, oh, look at this random thing. And we would never have been taught some of that stuff because
Right.
it was still kind of, or at least, I don't know, maybe this is dating me. I didn't think I'm that old, but it's just like, I don't feel like there was nearly as much of that in education. Obviously, there were always the pieces that had all these things that, and then you would try to learn them in a very strict way. But as
Yeah.
just like let's play with this in a lesson, like
Yeah.
what happens if you just try to make really weird sounds on your flute? And that feels like it's becoming more of a thing as well.
Exactly. No,
Yeah.
I would run with that. That is completely valid. And perhaps when you were talking about that, a thought came to my mind, maybe just social media in general, because a lot of musicians are kind of like pulling back the curtain of their practice routine. Like they will do lives, like they will practice on a live feed through Facebook or Instagram.
Yeah.
And they are kind of unveiling like what, as a professional musician or as a student, what their practice session looks like. And so they're being vulnerable by putting themselves out there and being okay with their practice session being public. So that means quirky sounds and mistakes and what any practice session would really authentically look like. And so maybe because we're getting a peek into people's practicing, maybe because these different musical genres like beatboxing are more accessible to us, and we're taking maybe ideas from other cultures, things like that, and we're playing with these different sounds, it's like, okay, we are now in this new generation of a real laboratory, like a real experimentation, because so many different ideas and content creators are out there who are more public. Like like you said so perfectly, when we were in school, I remember dial-up internet, and I remember having X amount of minutes to use on AOL, and my mom would scream at me like, you're holding up the phone line, get off the phone line, you know what I mean? And so we didn't have, like, we had Yahoo and Hotmail email accounts, but we didn't have this entourage of this amazing access to YouTube videos and podcasts and things like that. So technology definitely plays a role into this for sure.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that was, I think, the thing that it blew me away by the time you realized what a resource was. It is like YouTube, just being able to like go out and easily find performances of pretty much any piece you can want. But like kind of going back though, I do think that one thing I've noticed is that like when it comes to social media and like people putting up like live versions of their playing, there are some people I've seen who are doing like literally live, like just going to push record and practice. But I've also seen like a massive trend of people kind of saying, oh, here's me practicing today. And it's like clips, and it's like that kind
Polished.
of like, yeah, it's the highlight reels of their practice, which I think also is a little bit worrying, because then that kind of like sets up this expectation of like, wow, they sound really good practicing. I sound a mess when I practice, but that's the point, because I'm practicing, right? Like I'm working on these things. So I think there is like a level of like, social media has been great for opening some of those things, but I also think social media is massively in danger of like reverting a lot of that good work as well, just because, and that's the nature of it, whether you're a musician or just, watching your friends online, everybody's putting out their best version of themselves, so you always kind of have to try to take it with a grain of salt. But even somebody who lives on social media because of what I do, it's so hard to remind yourself of that. Like I know that I'm doing it. I'm putting out the things, like I'm not going to necessarily just record a random video of me. I mean, maybe I should be doing this more, giving me ideas.
Jot this down on my sticky right now.
Yeah, just crap videos, me messing up all over the place. It's absolutely fine. But yeah, I don't necessarily do that because you think, oh, well, people don't really want to listen to that, but maybe they do. Maybe they should. Maybe they don't want to, but they should. Just a reminder.
Yeah.
But yeah, everything. It's learning is messy. It should be messy.
Heck yes. Yes.
If it's not, you're doing it wrong. You're not learning.
And in so many areas too, just self-discovery should be messy, and relationships sometimes will be messy. And, full circle, like it dovetails into so many different areas of our life. And so showing yourself that self-compassion and saying, hey, we're not robots. We're going to be humans. We're going to make mistakes. How can I learn from this? So that way next time, maybe it flows a little better, or it's a little bit easier, or whatever your result is. So we've talked about setting up a really experimental space. with laboratory, being curious, listening. We've also talked about exercises and bringing in more different colorful activities to the lesson. I think these are all great tools and resources and steps towards that healthy studio that we've been talking about. What's one last thing that you would like to leave the listener with in terms of like, what's something you kind of air quote live by in terms of creating that supportive environment for your students so that way they feel seen, heard, and supported?
I think for me, and maybe this just ties into everything we've been talking about. For me, it's giving everyone permission, and really saying, like I just think about all those times I've had students come to me who are like, "Oh, I'm really nervous, like about playing," but it's like, go and mess it up, like. In fact, so I do actually do that quite a bit in lessons. If somebody says, "Oh, I always mess up this bit," and I think this comes from the Inner Game of Music. I'm sure you've probably read that.
Yes.
Yeah. But I think he is Barry Green. He does this. He's a bass player, and he suggests doing this. If like somebody says, "Oh, I always mess this up," and he's like, "Great, show me how you mess it up," and then they don't, because it's like this weird thing of like, first off, it's like, "Oh, I had permission to mess up," and now it's harder to do that. It's like, I don't know, but also if you mess up, who cares? And like, one of my favorite stories is a student of mine who came to me, and the very first lesson, she was like, "I have debilitating stage fright and performance anxiety." She's like, "Even coming here for a lesson took so much courage. Like, I just know that like," and, obviously we celebrated that and we worked with her and we tried to do all these things. I had a studio recital shortly after that. So I was like, "I would love it if you want to come perform, but obviously there's no pressure. It's just entirely an opportunity there for you." She was like, "Do you know what? Let's do it." So we played. And at the time I didn't have an accompanist. So we tried using Tom Play. And so we had like a little app, so, like it has the accompaniment with it. And I kept messing it up because I kept pushing the button and like the thing kept stopping, and then she had to restart. She restarted her piece 5 times in front of a live audience, and she laughed about it. And I could not have been happier. Like, she literally was just like, because she messed up a couple times and then I messed up because of the thing. And it was all just like it ended up being like a funny disaster type of thing. But she would she stood up in front of everyone. I remember what she said. She said, "Got to give them what they paid for." Right. And like, she was just like, she just made it into a massive joke. And that was one of those things where it's like, she had that permission to just be herself and just let it go messy. And I think that has always been like the biggest thing. So you, as a teacher, you should be giving your students permission, but to mess up, to, be messy, or to do whatever they want. If they want to go and do some hip hop beats, then let them go do like these little loops, but also the permission has to come from that student themselves as well. Because you're trying to teach them to give themselves that permission, if that makes sense.
Completely. Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that was, again, it ties into all of these things. But for me, that's always been like the biggest thing, is just saying, like, you have permission to fail. You have permission to learn. You have permission to play whatever you want. Like, there's no rules. That's the weird part, is that we love to pretend that there are. But there aren't.
Yeah. No, I love everything you said. And I love how certain minds and certain styles and ways of life and just philosophies of people are attracted to one another. You literally sound like me, and in a very good way, the best parts of me. I won't put you on my worst side. And what I mean by that is, I probably say in at least every lesson a week to each individual is not that you need permission from me. I want you to give yourself that permission. But because maybe you're not there just yet, and you don't trust your voice, or you don't trust whatever just yet, you have permission from me, your flute mentor and friend, who's cheering you on, to get off the page, to try improvisation, to, be okay with being nervous while you play. And I love that word permission. And I think that comes, especially when it comes from that flute mentor, it means so much from the student's perspective. Like, oh my gosh, like, because I think, like, myself included, when I looked up at, my great teachers who I really admired and respected. We put them on these pedestals, and it's because we respect them, and maybe sometimes even the greats like Ron Paul and Galway and things like that, we put them on really high pedestals, and then we realize they're human too. But we put our teachers on these pedestals and we think, they're out of reach, or what they're doing is unattainable. And it is. And when we show them like, hey, we are human too. I will make mistakes too. I am not perfect. But when we give that student that permission, it means so much to them because they respect you and they look up to you. And maybe by saying, hey, you have my permission, it kind of lowers that pedestal a little bit in terms of like, we're in this together. We're on the same plane. We're cheering each other on and learning together. And so it means the world to them, I think, when I see it in their eyes and that response and reply of like, oh, Dr. Heidi like believes in me and she's giving me that permission to showcase my own artistic voice in this musical passage or whatever the case may be. So I think you nailed it right on the head, saying it out loud and saying, hey, you don't need permission from me. I want you to give it to yourself, but you have permission to blank. And it's very empowering.
Yeah. And I think there's a level of like doing that very explicitly, of saying like, oh, you have my permission or that, but also just like demonstrating a level of permission. It goes a long way, like, when you're playing, like, for example, I do this all the time. We'll be playing a duet together in a lesson and, I'll play a wrong note. I'm not going to skip over it. I'll laugh about it and be like, oh, sorry about that. Like, so it's like just by showing them that even I give myself that permission without explicitly saying so, I think also creates that environment that tells them, oh yeah, no, maybe it is okay. Because as a teacher, it's really actually a scary thing to do, to admit that you've made a mistake.
Yeah.
Because, you're supposed to be the teacher. You're supposed to know everything. But yeah, if you're like, oh no, there are no B flats in this. I'm so sorry about that. Let's start again. Wrong
Switch over.
Yeah. But like, but obviously, hopefully you're not doing that all the time. But when you do, it that creates that environment for them where they're like, oh, it is okay to like laugh about it. And yeah, I mean, that's the goal, is that, you want to create that environment for them. But so it's hard. It's so hard. You can see students struggle with it so much. But yeah.
Yeah. I think reminding all of ourselves to be human. At the end of the day, we're human and we're still learning and growing together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I loved your take. I loved hearing your perspective on music education. And we kind of got a little, in a very good way, sidetracked it with flute pedagogy, but it's all interconnected. And I love our conversation. And I loved how you just shared so freely that humanness. And thank you for building an amazing community for people to tap into so they can start feeling empowered and start believing in themselves.
Yeah, but thank you so much for inviting me to chat about all these things that I get so excited about.
Yeah. So let's do an amazing plug into all of the wonderful things that you're doing. You have workshops going on, and you and I have an upcoming event as well that we want to announce.
Well, we have two. So we have, you're coming to the Flute Nerd Lab talking about storytelling, which I'm so excited about, on July 12th. But yeah, I've got some workshops in the Flute Nerd Lab. I've got Joanna So, just another flutist, coming in just a couple of weeks. So she's going to be speaking of like thinking about things in very bizarre ways, or not bizarre, but unique. She thinks about sound production in such a unique way that I just love listening to her talk about it. So that should be good. But then I'm coming to you on the 31st.
Yes, we have a lot on the docket, Alex, and I love all of it. So there are 2 events for you to pencil into your calendar right now. The first is where Alex is a guest through the Flute 360 Accelerator Program, and that's going down on Saturday, May 31st at 12 p.m. Central, 2025. She is going to talk all about how to combat perfectionism. So if that's your jam, you definitely want to show up, and the link will be in the show notes below. Also, don't forget, I'm going to be a guest in Alex's world. I'm going to be featured as a guest through a session, through an amazing workshop that Alex is hosting. That's going down on Saturday, July 12th, also at 12 p.m. Central Time, 2025. I will be talking about expressing yourself through storytelling. We want to really pop off your artistry and give you your individual, unique voice. So between those two events, we have a lot to look forward to. Well, thank you so much, Alex, for your time, energy, and talents. I love that you are in my 360 orbit now. And if there's anything I can do to support you through your career endeavors, I'm always here for you.
Oh, lovely. Thank you so much again for having me.
Thank you, Alex. Loved today's convo with Alexandra? Then you can't miss our live Flute 360 Accelerator session on Saturday, May 31st, where Alex will be diving deeper into how to combat perfectionism in your playing and teaching. You'll walk away with tangible strategies, support from our community, and a fresh mindset rooted in curiosity, not criticism. Register now using the link in the show notes below, and we'll see you inside the accelerator. Thanks.
Let's talk about flute.